We have a wonderful speaker today. He is the son of a well-known politician, a Bible graduate, sought after speaker, teacher, softball player, wonderful man of God. Here's my husband, Justin.
Yeah, no pressure at all, right? That well-known politician is my mom up in Michigan, so in her area. Might not know who she is in Texas. But Pastor Mark is doing Ironman today. I'm sure, I would think by now maybe he's on his third leg of the Ironman. And this is my third leg of my first Christian Ironman. I preached the first two, so doing the third one here. I titled my message, The Faith of Faulty People. I'm going to read a passage from Hebrews 11. Hebrews 11, we're going to read verse 32 to 34. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign enemies to flight. I don't know about the rest of you, but I recognize the name David. I've read lots and lots and lots about him. And Samuel, he's got a pretty good track record. Gideon, he's a familiar one from the Sunday school stories. Samson, he was that really strong guy, right? But Barak, Jephthah, who are those? And I was reading through Hebrews more than a month ago, and I was reading, the first part of Hebrews 11 talks about Abraham. It mentions Abel, Enoch, who didn't die, Noah, who followed God's direction, built an ark, saved his household, saved the animals, saved the human race. It talks about Abraham, who left his land to follow God and find the promised land. We know about Moses and the 10 plagues on Egypt, how he led the people in the wilderness, and how he sought God on the mountain, and he gave Israel the 10 commandments. These people are the fathers of our faith. There's an extensive narrative about them, what they did, how they lived. They weren't perfect, but they were pretty good. They had a good long track record of following God. Rahab is mentioned. We all know about Rahab in the story of Gideon, how she protected the Israelite spies. And then her and her family were saved because of her faith and her trust in God. But Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, there's quite a bit on Samson, but the other three, there's not much there. And I asked myself, who are these people in verse 32? What can we find out about them? So I want to look at these four leaders and see what we might have in common with them. Everybody in Hebrews 11 is all leaders. They all have their faults, but they learn to trust God in a greater way. These are all heroes of our faith. My question to you is this: who can you identify with? So we're going to look at, I'm just going to give a brief summary in each person. We're going to look at Gideon first. Gideon is mentioned in Judges 6. In verse 11, it gives his introduction. It says, he lived in Ophrah, who was the son of Joash, the Abizarite. It says, Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to hide it from the Midianites. So right off the bat, to me, he's shrewd, he's pretty clever, he's determined, which can be seen as a strength. He's a little bit fearful, so that's kind of on the faulty side, but yet he's bold. He was doing his threshing wheat in the winepress to keep it hidden from the Midianites. And the earlier verses said the Midianites would come in and ruin the crops of the Israelites. They would devastate their land. So I imagine there probably wasn't much food to go around or too many crops. Gideon knows about the the wonders of God. He knows all the things that God has done for his ancestors. And Gideon comes to the conclusion that God has abandoned them because of the Midianite oppression. And then it says, verse 14, Gideon is told by an angel of the Lord to go in the strength he has and save Israel because God is sending him. So anytime, well, here we see that, I guess to me, I see that an angel of the Lord spoke to him, told him he was strong. So anytime somebody tells me I'm strong, then that kind of tells me, oh, I probably am strong. He might not have realized it, but if an angel of the Lord tells you you're strong, you're strong. If the angel of the Lord tells you to go and do something, he's going to give you the confidence to do it. But Gideon was a guy that needed to have a sign. He asked the angel of the Lord for a sign. He said, can I bring you an offering? And you accept it, and then I'll know I'm in good standings, essentially. So he brings an offering to the angel of the Lord. It's accepted. And then he says, wow, like Gideon has a realization of, I've just seen God. And I'm okay. So I must be accepted by God. So Gideon has his first assignment, and that's to tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole. Then build a proper altar to God. So he's got cut down these altars and build a proper altar to the Lord your God. So rather than do it right then during the day, he waits till the cover of night, gets his servants, it says, and at night he cut down the altar to Baal and the Asherah pole, and then he set up an altar to God. So he's demonstrating he's bold, he's brave, he's being obedient. And the people the next morning, they're upset. And they're asking, who did this? And it's Gideon's father that says, hey. I think, he says, my son did this, but if you have a problem with that, it's not really your problem, it's the Baal's problem. If Baal is God, he'll contend with Gideon, he'll take care of him. If the Lord is God, well then, what have we been doing? Serving this other Baal, serving this other God. So the next thing in Gideon's life is the enemies of Israel prepare for battle against them. And it says, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he summoned his clan. Then he summons his clans and his neighbors to fight. So he's been empowered. And then he says, okay, Lord, I need to know that you're going to be with us. So he has a wool cloth, a fleece that he puts down, and he says, okay, Lord, when I wake up tomorrow, if my fleece has dew on it and the ground is dry, then I'll know that you're with us. Wakes up the next morning, his fleece is wet, the ground is dry. He says, okay, cool. Great, Lord, that was awesome. One more thing, Lord, don't be angry. Can I do it again? This time make the ground dry and my fleece wet. The ground wet and my fleece dry. Wakes up the next morning, the ground is wet, his fleece is dry. He says, okay, the Lord is with us. We can do this. Okay. So he goes from being timid to more empowered. He's learning to trust God more. So we see that Gideon has his army of 32,000 men, and God says, hold on, Gideon, you've got too many people. And I can see Gideon thinking, like, what do you mean I've got too many people? The other army has 100,000 plus. We've just got 32,000. God says to him, you're going to take to battle those that I pick. Gideon says, all right. And then it ends up that Gideon has an army of 300 people. So Gideon goes back to being afraid. And then God says, okay, Gideon, if you're really afraid, you need to go down and hear what these Midianites are saying. So him and his companion, they sneak down to the Midianite camp, and they hear a Midianite telling another guy, you never believe this dream I had. He says, this barley loaf, I think, came down the hill and crushed our camp. And it seems kind of a weird dream, but he says, the Midianite says to the other guy, that can only be Gideon's army. So now Gideon's back on top. He's confident again. He's like, all right, the Lord's got our back. And then there's the familiar story of Gideon takes his 300 men, surrounds the camp of the Midianites, and they break their torches. They have the fire in their jars, and they shout, and they say, "For the Lord and for Gideon." And then it's the Lord that causes the Midianites to flee. It says they killed 120,000, were killed that day, and the remaining 15,000 were shaken in their boots. I looked up a translation and it actually said a comparison of like shaken in their boots. They were terrified of Gideon, of this one guy. So we see that he's powerful, he's successful. And then the people wanted to make Gideon king. But he said, no, I'm not going to be king. The Lord is going to rule over us. So he's still humble. From this battle with the Midianites, it says that Gideon made a golden aphid with some of the spoils. All Israel worshipped it, and the aphid became a snare to Gideon and his family. So I said, okay, that's kind of a negative. He's being a little bit boastful. He's kind of bragging there. And then the end of chapter 8 in Judges, it says that Gideon's influence wasn't long-lasting. The people turned from God when he died. So we have this guy who's very timid. He's very afraid. Over and over again, the Lord empowers him. The Lord says, you can do it, come on, I'm with you. Takes on the enemy. He wipes him out. He refuses to be king. And he has a few not so good points to him. But it says, Gideon lived to a good old age, and the people enjoyed peace for 40 years. Now, I don't know how old he was when he took on these Midianites, but there's only like 5 people in the Bible that it says lived to a good old age. Of those 5, one of them is David, King David. Another one is Abraham. So my guess is that Gideon was probably much older than me, which just to me kind of amazes me. To me that just shows that you're never too old for God to use you. The next guy is Barak in Judges 4. The Israelites are being oppressed by the Canaanites for 20 years. Deborah the prophetess gives Barak a word from the Lord that he is to go with 10,000 men and attack Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army. This was the Canaanites. Barak was a guy who was a little bit unsure. In my opinion, he lacked confidence. And he says to Deborah, I'm not going to go by myself. You need to come with me. And Deborah says, because of this, the honor of killing Sisera is going to go to a woman and not you. Barak and his men attacked, and the Lord routed Sisera's army. All the troops of Sisera were killed, so he was definitely successful. It says, Sisera was killed by Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, with a tent peg through his temple. Judges 5 has Deborah and Barak's song of victory. It says, with Barak the land had peace for 40 years. So I see a guy that he may not have been totally sure of himself. He lacked a little confidence, but he went out and did what the Lord said. And he was the leader for 40 years. The next person is Samson. And I think we all know about Samson. As a kid, he was one of the favorite people talked about in Sunday school. The story of Samson is interesting. It's almost like reading a diary of a gang wars. One side is provoked, they attack, and Samson reattacks, and then they're crying, so then they attack, and then it's back and forth. But for some reason, none of the Israelites are killed. It's just more and more Philistines. Samson's parents are told before he's even born that he is going to be set aside to the Lord. That he's going to be a Nazirite. His hair is to never be cut. He's never to drink wine or strong drink, and he's going to be the one to start to deliver the Israelites from the Philistines. So right away, it's easy for me to see how Samson would be included in Hebrews 11, that he was set apart, he was chosen from birth to do great things. The story of Samson, after he's born, starts out when he wants to take a Philistine woman to be his wife. It says, on the way down to meet the parents, this is Samson and his parents going to meet her parents, a lion attacks him. And Samson kills it with his bare hands. It says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and Samson killed it. He never told anybody. He didn't tell his parents. He didn't tell his wife-to-be. And then on a return trip, he discovers that in this lion, there's honey. So based on this lion attacking him, and now it has honey, he makes a riddle. And during his wedding feast, he challenges the Philistines. He says, I've got a riddle for you. His father-in-law had given him 30 companions at this wedding, and Samson says to them, if you can solve my riddle, I'll give you 30 articles of clothing. If you can't, you owe me 30 articles of clothing. So the Philistines are scrambling. They're trying to figure it out. And they end up threatening his wife, and they say, hey, if you don't find out the answer to this, we're going to kill you. So she begs and pleads with Samson. Samson tells her, and then his 30 companions come to Solomon on the final day of the wedding feast, and they say, hey, we figured it out. Samson gets really upset. He says, I know how you found out. This is ridiculous. So to get his 30 articles of clothing, Samson goes and kills 30 Philistines and brings back their clothes. Samson demonstrates to me that he's pretty smart. He's got a show of strength. He's somewhat humble. He's definitely dependent on God. But he seems to have an anger streak. He seems to be a guy with a little bit of rage and revenge. And to me, I would classify this as murder when he kills these 30 people. And then later, Samson goes and returns to his wife, and then he finds out that she's been given to another man. So Samson gets upset, and it says he catches 30 foxes, pairs them together, ties a torch between their tails, and then he lets the foxes run through the harvest grain as well as their olive orchards, burning them up. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know how hard it is to catch one fox, let alone 300, and then to pair them together and tie a torch on their tails. If somebody can show me that or make a video, I'd love to see it. So the Philistines get angry with Samson that he has just burned their harvest, and so they kill his wife and his father-in-law. Then Samson needs to get revenge. So he kills them out of the town, and then he flees to his stronghold. So we got Samson is provoking the Philistines. He's again angry. He's again in a rage. He's getting revenge. I think he's a murderer again, and he's destroying the crops. Later, the Philistines attack a town in Judah, and they raid it, and they tell the people there, we want Samson. And they say, okay, fine. So the people of the town go and find Samson, and they say, Samson, we have a problem. These people want you, and we want things to be peaceable. We want things to be okay, so will you go with us? And Samson says, well, don't kill me, and I'll go with you. So he goes. As soon as he's on the Philistines, he snaps the ropes that are on him, and then it says he picks up a fresh jawbone of a donkey, and he kills 1,000 people. After this, he calls out to the Lord in thirst, asking for something to drink. And the amazing thing to me is God splits open. It says God opened up a hollow place, and water came out. Now, the last time I checked, the only times that God provided water out of nothing was with Moses. And he struck the rock and water came out. So to me, I'm like, wow, Samson's a man of faith here. He's asked the Lord for water and the Lord provided. So he's dependent on God, but it also seems to me he's a little bit selfish. In chapter 16, the story of Samson gets a little more interesting. It says he goes to Gaza in Philistine territory, and he visits a prostitute. The people of the town decide that in the morning they're going to kill Samson. And I keep asking myself, every time I read this, I'm saying, why was he going to visit a prostitute in a foreign town? Why was he doing what he's doing? But whatever, he did it. Middle of the night, he wakes up, and he decides to rip the gates off the city and the posts. And then not only does he tear them off the walls, but he takes them back to the territory of Judah. So I guess to me it's like again, Samson's being selfish, but yet on the good side, he destroyed the gates of a Philistine town. And after this, he falls in love with Delilah, another Philistine woman. And the Philistines this time, they decide to bribe her, and they say, instead of threatening to kill her, and they say, hey, if you'll get Samson to tell us his secret, why he's so strong, we'll give you lots and lots of money. So repeatedly, Samson goes to see her, and repeatedly she asks him, what's your secret? What's your secret? And she keeps bugging him and nagging him, and he tells her a few different things. And so I'm like, I read it and I think, Samson, you're a liar. What are you doing? You're a liar. You're being selfish. And he's also showing a lack of self-control. After a number of times going to visit this woman, he finally gives up his secret. So then Delilah cuts off his hair, the Samsons come in, and he thinks that they've tied him up, and he thinks that he's going to snap these ropes and break out and kill these Philistines just like all the other times. But he can't, because his hair was cut. His oath to the Lord was broken. So then it says that his eyes were gouged out, and he's put in prison. And then Samson's final act is he's taken out of prison. The Philistines are having a party for their god Dagon. And Samson tells a servant there, he says, put me between the two pillars, put me between two pillars. So Samson is placed in that spot, puts his hands on the pillars, and then he cries out to the Lord. He says, Lord, essentially, hear my prayer. I want to kill these Philistines for gouging out my eyes. And the Lord enables him to push down the pillars of the temple. And it says he killed 3,000 Philistines that day. He killed more in his death than he did during his life. So Samson, to me, he was selfish. He's constantly selfish. He was a vengeful guy. He showed some dependence on God. And it also says that he was a leader for 20 years. And I always think about Samson and I think, how much more could he have done if he had a little more self-control, if he was a little more dependent on God? The final guy I want to look at today is Jephthah. He's from Judges chapter 11. And it says, essentially, he learned well in Sunday school, he was well versed in war, and he was diplomatic. That was the first few things I got from him. The story on him starts out that he's a mighty warrior, but he's the son of a prostitute. And he was driven away by his stepfamily and would have no inheritance from his father's family. So right away we see that this Jephthah, he's brave, he's confident, he's determined, but on the downside, he's unwanted, he's an outcast, and he's rejected. It says he fled to the land of Tob, where worthless fellows collected around Jephthah and went out with him. Essentially, he had a small army that rallied to him. So then, to me, that tells me he was an influential leader. Sometime later, the Ammonites made war against Israel, and the elders of Gilead sought out Jephthah to lead them into battle. So they make a deal with this guy they've thrown out and say, hey, we're sorry. Will you lead us into battle? We'll make you the head of our clan. So Jephthah says, okay, I'll take you up on that offer. So Jephthah asks the king of the Ammonites that are declaring war on the Israelites, he says, why are you attacking us? And Jephthah says, because you took our land. Now give it back. It's as simple as that. You took our land, give it back. Now Jephthah knows his history, and he sends a lengthy response back and says, look, we've been here for 300 years. Our God, the God of Israel, gave us this land 300 years ago. If your God is so great, why didn't he give it back 300 years ago? Why didn't he give it back 200 years ago? Why didn't he give it back last week? But it is what it is. And he says, Jephthah declared that the Lord, the judge, will decide between the two of them. So, like Jephthah, he's pretty knowledgeable. He's been paying attention in Sunday school, has been listening to Pastor Mark's sermons, so he knows. He knows what's going on. He makes it. So he puts his trust in the Lord, and then him and his army go after these Ammonites, and he makes a vow to the Lord. And this always puzzled me. He says, if you'll give the Ammonites into my hand, then whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's, and I'll offer it up as a burnt offering. Now, reading this, I think, the first thing to come out of his house, what is that? A dog? Something that, some pesky dog that he didn't really like. It seems kind of arrogant, reckless, a little bit foolish to make this kind of vow. And then as you read on, Jephthah defeated the Ammonites, and then when he comes home, the first thing out of his house is his only daughter. And he says, alas, my daughter, you have brought me very low, and you have become the cause of great trouble to me. For I have opened my mouth to the Lord, I cannot take back my vow. And she says to him, my father, you have opened your mouth to the Lord. Do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, now that the Lord has avenged you on your enemies, on the Ammonites. And then she says, can I just have a couple months to mourn because I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to get old. And he says, yeah, that's fine. You can go. And then she returned. And Jephthah did as he said he would. He sacrificed his daughter to the Lord. So to me, this is always one of those puzzling things. On the plus side, he's committed, he's a man of his word, but at the same time, it's like, okay, do you think you should have took back your vow? It was always one of those things that puzzled me, and I asked a professor at school about it once. I said, did this really happen? I said, did he really kill his daughter? And he said to me, yes, he did, because that's what the narrative in Judges says. And that was something that the people around them would have done, the non-Israelite people. He said Jephthah was doing as best as he knew how, even though it was pretty ugly and gruesome. And Jephthah led Israel for 7 years. It wasn't necessarily a long time, but it was a while. To me, he seems like he's the black sheep of his family. He's an outcast. But yet he's a leader and a mighty warrior. He seemed to have it all together until he made that vow, and then he kept the vow and he killed his daughter. To me, like these 4 people, I can see how some of them would make it into Hebrews 11, but Samson, like the things that he did, I'm like, wouldn't that kind of disqualify you? And Jephthah with his sacrificing his daughter, I'm like, that's messed up, man. Like how. And I sometimes ask myself, like, how do these people make it into Hebrews 11? But it wasn't my decision, it's not my decision. Those people are there because the Lord wanted them there. But which of these 4 do you relate to? Who can you identify with? Gideon was fearful, was timid, and afraid. Barak was unselfish, was unsure, and he lacked confidence. Samson was always angry. He was always looking for revenge. He seemed to be selfish, and he seemed to have no self-control whatsoever. Jephthah was arrogant, foolish, reckless, angry, vengeful, and nobody from Hebrews 11 was perfect. Most of the others seemed to be better than these 4, but yet here they are. They're counted among the heroes of our faith. The Spirit of the Lord came upon them and empowered them at times. We now have the Spirit of the Lord always with us. But what are your faults? Are you timid, afraid, fearful? Do you have anger or rage problems? Are you a bit selfish? A liar, perhaps? Do you lack confidence or self-control? If you can answer yes to any of those, then you have something in common with these 4 heroes of our faith. It doesn't matter your age, we all have something in common with them. Let's learn to trust God more. Let's learn to be completely dependent on the Lord. Let's become an influential leader. Let's leave a mark in the lives of those around us. Let's be remembered as leaders of our faith. With God, we can overcome our faults. With God, we can do great things for our family, our community, and the kingdom of God. If there's a decision that you need to make for Christ, you can come forward during this song. If you'd like prayer, you can also come forward.